In my eyes, this store looked like a cheap restaurant of the good old days, but by now it was practically a high-class eating. To put it another way, in the current Japan, Japanese cooking is like foreign dining. I'm not in politics or the military, so I can't take back Japan for us. However, I want to open a path to society where fellow countrymen help each other. I want to show people that path. Since the Japanese became a minority, they were now the lower class of this country. As the proverbs, only when basic needs are met can people spare decorum, and poverty brings simplicity imply. Just being poor weakens the heart. I hate to say it, but these days there is a widespread wretchedness in the Japanese people. Enough to make them willing to trample down anyone, countrymen or otherwise, to get what they need to survive. There's no getting around it. To try and put it as kindly as possible, it was an era where you got to starve until you died. Wow, sounds lovely. And because those are the times we live in, I want to revive the will to help each other. If only when basic needs are met can people spare decorum, then the very first step is to build a society where everyone has enough of those things. And that's why you revised the wages for laborers. Caleb was the one who tried to do that. I'm only inheriting his goal. He may have been a terribly violent man, but his drive to save the society of his countrymen is the one thing he still deserves praise for, I think. I had heard Caleb's name from all over his group as well. He was the big bad guy who reigned as a tyrant and drove C-23 to the point of destruction. The way that Madame Rose spoke of this evildoer with an almost fond gaze was something that stuck with me. After being blessed with many fortunes, I gained the power to make my ideals a reality. There's no doubt that it was a coincidence, just like the time I suddenly became the Madam. However, everyone entrusted their futures to my ideals. That's why they gave me the title of Madam. The real me, Rose Haibara, truly is a cowardly, insignificant person. However, when I'm Madame Rose, I must not be that way. I have a responsibility to draw out my ideals, show the path, and guide everyone along it. As she said this, her gaze felt like the gaze of a noble person, worthy of respect. Then I directly asked her and the others, about her and the others. She told me everything, without holding back. That she controlled a mafia called the Primavera family. That force was the final power for protecting her countrymen, and that she decided not to avert her eyes from that fact. People avert their eyes and pretend not to see it, but the criminal underworld exists. Yes. If everyone abandons that role, then thugs looking out only for their own self-interest will fill it. And that leads to misfortune for a great many people. Simply leaving the throne of the criminal underworld open might be considered irresponsible to the cause of peace. And so she refused to look away from that world and that role. With an immense sense of responsibility to protect the society of her countrymen, she chose to sit on that throne herself. Well, I mean, that's like the whole point of kind of like bringing all of that shit like into a legal space. Because it really corners what can and can't be governed by random fucking people. It takes power away from them. I kept on questioning myself, saying that someone like me didn't have what it took to fill that role. However, during the considerable time that I wasted questioning myself, a large number of people met with misfortune. If I had accepted that I was Madame Rose right away, I would surely have been able to lower the number of pitiable sacrifices. But you wouldn't have understood why you needed to be it. It's like that forced growing that you have to go through that to understand why you need to. Otherwise, you might not know why. That's not true. It's because you had time to question yourself that you became an excellent madam. You mustn't focus on the past. Nothing in the past was a complete waste. It's a collection of all those things that brought us to where we are today. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. So, wages are better, and there's a lot more people in shops here now. What do you plan to do next? Simply put, the next step is food culture. Don't you think the Japanese spirit is really in soy sauce and miso? I agree. They do say that a drop of soy sauce is a drop of a Japanese person's soul, after all. I mean, if we got into creating products that we can export, that's how we generate wealth in this area. The distribution and production of Japanese food were destroyed in the Great Disaster. After that, large quantities of American and Chinese ingredients were imported, and Japanese food culture was on the brink of destruction. As Claudia said just now, it was now a lot easier to get ketchup, mustard, and ingredients for Chinese food than soy sauce. Well, I mean, to be fair, if we're in like the middle of a city, I don't think it's really easy to create soy sauce. We don't have like access to the fields required to do that. The soy sauce and miso that the Japanese used to love were now scarce luxury items. Even the Japanese people all want to regain their eating lifestyles. I think food culture is the very first building block in the soul of a person. In other words, you want to see it that a lot of soy sauce and miso get into circulation. That's right. If there's a lot of that going around, lots of people will buy it. If there's lots of demands, then of course supply and production will stabilize and increase. The Japanese people have been poor, so they've kept buying cheap foreign ingredients, unable to afford domestic goods. And that's what started the vicious cycle of only foreign ingredients circulating and Japanese food producers going out of business. Gotta love those negative feedback loops. As we have less money to spend on that shit, less stuff gets made because less stuff is spent on it. They make less money, so they can't produce as much. When there's less to buy, the price goes up. We still are poor, meaning shit gets cut even more, so fucked. If we can change wages and rebuild the circulation of goods, we'll be able to protect your food culture, and you'll even save the food producers you'll save the food producers supporting it. Okay. Exactly. Next, I'd like to mobilize the solidarity of our countrymen to center around the rebirth of our food culture. If people don't drink miso soup every now and then, they'll forget they're Japanese. I think every time they speak Japanese, they realize they're Japanese, but okay. It'd be wonder if the Japanese people could be able to be glad to have been born Japanese. And that's the ideal you're striving for. That's right. Making that come true, or rather, clearing the path for that to happen is my job. Well, there's still a lot of tough things going on. There's still a lot of trouble remaining from their wage issue, too. And we're also having difficulties with the soy sauce and miso issue. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Rose. I can't wait until I can sell food made with real soy sauce. By this point, Madame Rose no longer looked like just a sweet girl slightly older than myself. She was a person worthy of respect who had announced great ideals and was willing to sweat and toil to make them a reality. It was just too impressive and divine a sight for someone like me, who couldn't even remember her own name. However, I felt a desire grown in me, a desire to do something to help with our ideals. No, to help our fellow Japanese countrymen. It's exactly because of the times we live in that we mustn't think only about ourselves. Yeah, but that's like Rose's charisma, to be able to get people to rally behind her cause, and that's why she was better than Caleb. Because he only could play on like one emotion, and that's it. That feeling of wanting to take back what you had or whatever. It wasn't really charismatic as Rose is. She inspires people. The spirit to help one's countrymen must be treasured and nourished. She just has a stronger sense of charisma. Anyone's capable of thinking that. The ability to turn that into action and make it a reality was what made her so great. Is it time already? A man who had been mixed in with the customers and appeared to be a guard whispered into Rose's ear and pointed at his watch. I'm sorry. Looks like the next item on my schedule is drawing near. Oh, is it? I was going to serve a brand new potato dessert. Please let's help try some. Sorry, and please enjoy yourself. Must be tough. Is this a job related to making your ideals come true? More or less. By making wages large, too many people have gathered, and as a result, there are more and more people than there are jobs. Well, that's like the idea of frictional unemployment. Depending on their situation, it's gotten harder for some people to get jobs than before wages were lifted. A lot of people have been pouring into City 23 from all around. They've grown a bit too much, and we seem to be seeing more disreputable looking people around lately. That's a problem too. Life can be tough. Which, another thing, we can invest in infrastructure at this point, if we have enough money. Start building buildings. Hire those people to build those buildings. We can't throw in the towel. One by one, we've got to tackle everything head on. Like, you can't have everyone employed. It's literally impossible. Because wages would necessarily get fucked. Because there's unemployment, that's why wages go up, trying to get the best whatever. Madame Rose placed a new $1,000 bill on the table and rose from her seat. Then about half of the customers in this cramped restaurant also rose from their seats. I was shocked. They were all her guards. This made several customers realize that she was Madame Rose, and they darted glances of awe and respect at her. Outside, a line of luxury cars was waiting for her. A large number of guards welcomed her with a deep bow. As she left, her back was overflowing with the dignity of one who guided the society of her countrymen. Madame Rose is a really incredible person, isn't she? I'm a bit worried that she's working too hard. But that girl will bear the burden. The ideals held by a great many of us. We can't become like her. However, we all want to contribute in some way, with little things we can do. Yeah. We've got to contribute somehow, using the things we can do. She gave me a name. In other words, she practically gave me life. Partly to repay her kindness, I want to contribute something I can manage. I'd reached a decision on what I ought to do, and found a person to depend on, which made me feel a sense of power, as though my feet were planted firmly on the ground. I am Rapunzel. Yes, a girl with no memory who's just started a new life in City 23. But surely, even for me, there's some way I can help the woman who accepted me as a fellow countryman, despite my past. Don't give up me. Forgive me. I wish at least your meals didn't have to be rushed. It's fine. I'm already used to it. Lee has asked to speak with you about the recent matter. It's about time that we declare a clear position on this matter. Will we save our Japanese countrymen without discriminating between them, or will we prioritize our countrymen in City 23? That's a tough one. If we don't discriminate, that means we have to start pushing out China. Like 100%. That's the only option. If we do prioritize our people, we'll be able to prosper for longer. Discriminating between our countrymen is something I'd much rather avoid, but according to your ideals, all Japanese people are our countrymen. I understand that it won't be proper to distinguish between them. However, we are an organization of City 23, and we exist thanks to the support of the residents of City 23. Unless all the Japanese people in every other city want to give us money, if we lose the support of our countrymen in the city, our foundation will grow unstable. Serving a cup of porridge may save a single person from starvation. However, if we take that porridge and gave 1 grain of rice worth to 1,000 people, no one would be saved. Thank you, Richard. That is very true. Our ultimate goal is to help all of our countrymen. However, we currently don't have the strength or the scale to do that. Exactly. In order to make our ultimate ideals a reality, we must step forward in the proper manner. Lee said it himself once. I know. Saving the person in front of you means deciding to be aware of the fact that you're delaying helping the next person for a time. Those who fail to reach that decision cannot avoid being labeled as hypocrites, full of nothing but ideal words. You've grown more reliable. I'm sure Amanda's rejoicing. I'm sure Amanda's fucking someone right now. Even in the past, the area in front of the employment agency had flourished with laborers who spoke only Japanese, waiting for trucks bringing cheap day labor jobs. However, the place was now filled with a crowd that had put all the old ones to shame. There weren't just laborers from City 23. Beyond just Japanese people from other cities who'd heard about higher wages, large numbers of Chinese laborers had also come rushing in. Fuck off! Japanese only! Which meant that the larger number of people were fighting over the same number of jobs. Even in the past, that would have been a rush forward whenever trucks came. However, things were no longer so easy going. It was war. Let me on, let me work, I'll do anything. Out of my way, don't block the road. Don't care what job it is, let me on. Damn these bastards blocking the road. Give us work, how long you'd think we'd been waiting here? Fine, the spot's good enough, so start gathering people. We're carrying cargo at the harbor, need 10 strong men, 400 for the day. What the hell's that? They're blocking the road and getting jobs there. Now mess it around. Don't ignore the employment agency code. Deal with your code. I came here from Ichikawa, hearing they had better pay around here. I'm from a Hachioji. We're betting our lives on this. Come on, out of the way. We're full, open the road. Damn outsiders, it's your fault we can't get jobs. How is that to me, bastard? I've got a hungry child. Chinese. What's wrong, Chinese bastards? Why don't you go fish through the trash in Chinatown or something? The place is for Japanese only, so get your Chinese asses out of here. Ow! What do you think you're doing, Chinese bastard? You looking for a fight with me? Get out, China, stop stealing our jobs. They're taking our jobs. A scuffle broke out in the crowd. Each side grabbed the other's clothes, insulted them, and spat out the accumulation of their pent-up emotions. The MPs at the entrance of the agencies blew their whistles and came running. There were people who had apparently been punched and blood dripping from their noses, as well as people curling up while getting hit with the MP batons. There were people who ran away panicked, realizing that they couldn't make money in the clink, and people yelling incomprehensibly. Now that the number of laborers had swelled thanks to the inflow, their frustration had reached a peak. Look, just saying, Japanese only. Get the fuck out of here. Have your bodyguards, keep them from going in. I hear another meaningless fight broke out in front of the employment agency. I've heard the same thing. It really is a shame. Everyone's frantic to feed their starving families, and you really should keep your people out of our area. It's ours. Fuck off. Our territory. You don't see us going into yours. Bang. Get the fuck out. The number of people in front of the agency has increased, and a lot of people are losing their tempers, unable to get jobs. I believe those laborers who lived in City 23 from the start will not find this at all amusing. Even though wages have risen, the influx of so many people from outside means they fail to get jobs, and they never see the benefit. True, I understand how they feel too. This is a transitional period. All types of reform undergo a period of disorder. What you have done will slowly seep in over time. That's true. Time may be what we need. If laborers would gather for high wages, the other cities paying low wages wouldn't be able to find people anymore. Of course, employers would have to match Rose's wage rises to continue gathering laborers. But what they can do is try to wait it out as long as possible to see if it is a long-term viable strategy from Rose's side. Unwilling to abandon their vested interests, they would hesitate to imitate Rose for some time. However, they would surely give up eventually. When that happened, the wages for low-level laborers across Tokyo would reach a reasonable level. Until that time comes, problems are to be expected. It is sad, but the fact must be accepted. However, what saddens me is a different issue entirely. Rose already knew what that was. To the laborers who had been in City 23 from the start, laborers coming from other jobs were enemies out to steal their jobs. However, among those people, trouble with Chinese men had been particularly strong lately. It was hardly unexpected. They were of a different race, with different language and customs. To Japanese people, they stood out far more than the Japanese men from other cities. Because of that, it was easy for these people to face the brunt of any disturbances. Conflicts with foreign laborers during recessions happen in countries all across the world. True, even out of recessions. If left alone, this would develop into a situation that harms Japanese and Chinese relations, or friendship. Though we live in the same city, we are different races with different cultures. Yes, if we lose our sympathy for each other, it will probably lead to negative results. So keep the fuck out of our stuff. It's pretty simple. I didn't fight for your guys' wages. Fuck off. Both Primavera and the Golden Dragon Society were organizations of the criminal underworld. If the situation continued to worsen, the relationship between the Chinese and Japanese continued to grow more dangerous. Then both organizations would face demands to take revenge against the other. Both Rose and Lee were calm and composed and didn't want a feud. However, both Primavera and the Golden Dragon Society established their organization thanks to the support of the inhabitants of their own turfs. If Chinese-Japanese frustrations grew too big, both sides would have responded to demands from supporters, which would result in conflict. I'm sure I could get Butler to support me, and then we can just push the Chinese out. Even though the leaders of both camps didn't want a feud, it was still possible for one to break out. Partly to make it possible to maintain their own positions, they needed to suppress any further trouble. In any event, we believe that the prime cause is the unemployment agency becoming overcrowded and lawless. I agree, we have the same view. And so I have a proposal for you all today. Let's hear it. Why don't our two groups take joint control of the maintenance of public order in this place? When there's trouble between Chinese and Japanese, let people from both sides cooperate. Listen to opinions from both parties and mediate. I believe this is a world peace style solution, in accordance with the ideals of the United Nations. My apologies, but the employment agency is not the Golden Dragon Society's turf. The brackish waters of the border of Chinatown would be one thing. However, we cannot simply accept a proposal which stations GDS forces at the agency, which is clearly within Primavera's turf. The Golden Dragon Society has no turf. If our countrymen are in trouble, we'll save them, no matter where they are. Be they in Tokyo or New York. It is that simple. Different definitions of turf between Japanese and Chinatown forces have been a smoldering issue ever since the days of Caleb. The Japanese tended to decide turfs within a map. Yes, that is how you do it. All problems within that turf were their own responsibility, and on the flip side, they showed no concern over any trouble concerning outside their turf. That's how a mafia, a gang, or anything runs their shit. You have certain areas that are ours. If you go into someone else's turf, you're fucking on your own, dude. And so they had an irresponsible side, unwilling to get involved with one of their countrymen who was harmed, as long as it happened outside their turf. For the Japanese, it was very natural to look at a fellow countryman being harmed in another country as partly their own fault, for going somewhere dangerous. However, Chinatown was different. To them, it was their fellow countrymen that ought to be protected, not some area on a map. So if a Chinese person was harmed, they would intervene no matter who claimed to own that turf. The Americans probably had similar feelings on that matter. We care if someone else is in an area, but sometimes you kind of ask for it. The difference of basing your principles of turf or your countrymen. Arguing which was right would be a waste of time. The important point was that the two neighboring forces had different understandings on that matter. We have no desire whatsoever to encroach on Primavera's turf. This is merely a proposition to save countrymen on both sides fairly. and sure correctly showed Chinese and Japanese friendship. However, during the past year, Chinatown expanded fiercely. They used their considerable financial muscle to buy up one shopping district after another that had been laid waste by Caleb. Richard had always viewed Chinatown's expansionary inclination as dangerous, and claimed that they would eventually drive out the Japanese colony. So to him, this proposal would lead to further expansion of the GDS power. Wasn't acceptable at all. Agreed. Richard's correct. Pardon me, but we would like to take responsibility for handling this case. In that case, do you have a better proposal than mine? We're currently making preparations to establish a labor union for our Japanese countrymen in City 23. We would clearly designate the union office as a place for day laborers to find work as opposed to an unregulated location such as the employment agency. We would also guarantee them this privilege by issuing union cards. Matters would be arranged that the members could receive jobs equally, according to an ordered and planned system. Might I ask what the qualification requirements would be for members of this union? To be Japanese, to be from City 23. Fuck off. First, membership would be limited to those with a certificate of residence in City 23. And that would include the countrymen of Chinatown with certificates of residence in City 23? No, fuck off! The union would exist as part of the Primavera structure, so naturally it would be directed towards our Japanese countrymen. Get the fuck out of here. Lee snorted and his eyes glinted. Of course, as a person who represented the interests of Chinese laborers, he couldn't accept this. There's Chinese jobs inside the employment agency, bro. You can take those. It would mean Chinatown laborers would be unable to eat. That's your fucking problem, dude. You should probably hire better people and give better wages. Are there not many employers in Chinatown willing to offer jobs to those who speak Chinese? I believe there are more well-off people there than among the Japanese, who form the lowest class. You cannot get away with that excuse. After all, the double market rate wages you offer are just too overpowering. Not all Chinese employers are as well-off as you. They cannot afford to pay double wages. If our people decide to go to the employment agency in search of higher wages, who are we to stop them? We are. Besides, lately there have been Chinese businessmen suffering because they cannot find laborers, thanks to your one-sided wage increases. I regret having to say it, but some have begun to criticize this action as a Japanese-centric invasion. Economic invasion. This was a matter that has also worried Lee from the very start. If Primavera controlled City 23, there would be a radical change in wages and a massive wage panic. Good! However, he decided at the time to support Primavera, even if it had to postpone dealing with that matter, since Caleb was too dangerous and needed to be defeated. Lee, that's a misunderstanding. We're only doing this to increase the income of our countrymen. Besides, before we took action, Chinese people would never come to search for work at the employment agency in the first place. That is not true. For a long time, there have been a large number of Chinese people getting jobs from the employment agency. You simply couldn't tell who they were, because they thought speaking in Chinese would stir up trouble and tactfully kept their mouths shut. Oh, so they're just deciding not to now. You fucking snake bastard.